also known as the Tiger Tower. Firefighters reached the scene late on Friday in minutes. They've been congratulated for getting everyone out safely. The Football Club World Cup has kicked off in Miami, an expanded tournament that's attracted widespread criticism. The opening fixture sees Inter Miami and Lionel Messi face Egyptian side Al Ahly. Jacob Evans reports.
The Club World Cup used to feature just 7 teams, with the winners of each regional competition facing off to see who's best. It now has 32 sides from all over the globe. This expansion has brought widespread criticism and legal complaints over player welfare and fixture congestion. The football usually registers minimal interest, but concerted efforts have been made to bring attention to this year's cup, including an exclusive investment deal signed with Saudi Arabia and Petrobras. FIFA says it will help boost interest, but critics say it's sportsmanship.
BBC News. Welcome to the inquiry from the BBC World Service. I'm Tony Reid. Each week, one question, 4 expert witnesses, and an answer. In August of last year, a baby boy was born in a hospital in Philadelphia, in the United States. He looked healthy, but very quickly it became clear something was wrong. He was sleeping too much and wasn't eating. Blood tests showed that baby KJ had sky-high levels of anemia in his body. The root cause was his genes, particularly a specific gene mutation that didn't allow his liver to expel the anemia. Doctors and scientists entered a race to try to treat him before his condition led to a coma. In a few short months, they had designed and gained government approval for a gene-editing drug tailored specifically to him. Earlier this year, baby KJ received 3 infusions, each a month apart, containing billions of microscopic gene editors honed in on the mutation in his liver. He became the first ever recipient of a gene therapy designed to treat a single person. KJ will need to be monitored for the rest of his life, but a few months after the treatment, his health improved beyond recognition. So this week on The Inquiry, we're asking, have we seen a breakthrough in treating genetic diseases? Part 1. Saving baby KJ.
The sun has been shining ever brighter in the weeks since we lost life. And the reason is we've been able to leave humanity for quite some time. We are a bit like astronomers. We can see the stars, but we can't touch them. This amazing technology basically lets us touch the stars.
The ability of scientists to analyze an individual's genetic makeup began in the 1980s, and since then gradually opened up a whole new world of medicine.
I am Peter Arnold. I'm a professor in the Molecular and Cell Biology Department at the University of California, Berkeley, and I am a director at UC Berkeley's Innovative Genomics Institute.
The root of baby KJ's health problems lay in a rare genetic fault which affected specifically the functioning of his liver.
And one of the scary things about our DNA is a tiny typo can hold a lot of fun. If you just read a person's DNA, one letter at a time, it will take you a century to read the whole thing. It's really long. And what was wrong with baby KJ? One letter in that century-long text. Now, unfortunately for him and his family, that typo occurred as part of our DNA that instructs our cells how to deal with how to break it down, how to properly digest it, and how to get rid of it. We don't need it.
Baby KJ's faulty gene led to something called a urea cycle disorder. Doctors could only successfully manage it for a few short months, but in the end it would likely lead to his death.
Many children like this wasn't unknown, and unfortunately what the death was almost to the damages of the baby brain. So he was fortunately for him cared by Dr. Rebecca Arns Nicholas, or the leading physician for children in Philadelphia. They really know how to protect these children, but there is no way. Basically, keep them everything is made up, and guess what we are? We're specialized in guess what? We're the areas that typos. But the big question was, how they do it in time. And the doctor said that if you wait 9 months, so that kind of timeline has been that in the history of everything. So Chapman went, well, we're trying to contract participants. That's what it goes on.
Theodore designed the treatment, but he needed to collaborate with other experts to manufacture and test it, and to show America's drug regulator, the FDA, that it was safe to use.
This was like a test. There's a group of superheroes who don't know about their superpowers that came together across multiple organizations to try to see that they devastate disabilities. So I think that the human element is actually remarkable because it showcases the fact that all of these different organizations, all of these different people did in fact come together to save a baby.
Baby KJ was treated in February, March, and April of 2025 with the new drug, 6 months after the team first swung into action. It was an extraordinarily short time frame. The technology behind the drug is called CRISPR. The discovery of CRISPR dates back over a decade as a natural process occurring in bacteria in our bodies. When these bacteria are attacked by a virus, they're able to track down the virus by targeting its DNA.
CRISPR carries with it chemicals throughout the liver. There is a little snippet where the DNA acid will bind, and in that snippet is a stretch of genetic text that matches the RNA. This means we are CRISPR with a snippet of RNA that matches the type of in baby KJ's DNA. It gives you another molecule naturally repairs the defect. This technology is called CRISPR-based therapy. This medicine was discovered by a science genetic type that was binding to the gene.
The mechanism by which the drug given to baby KJ was able to track down and edit the specific faulty gene is, as you might expect, a complicated business. So let's look at it a little more closely. Part 2. Wonderful CRISPR. Virginia Schultz is a professor at the Life Science Center of Bill Gates University. DNA is a double-stranded chain molecule, which looks like a twisted ladder. There are 46 pairs in each cell in our body, and they are, in effect, an instruction manual telling our body how to function.
DNA is sometimes called a blueprint of life. You can read DNA as a program in its development and functioning of all living organisms, including humans. And like in any program, that scientists call mutations happen in DNA resulting in genetic disorders.
Sometimes if the genes are wrong, they're not telling the cells properly how to function.
If mistakes in certain genes, so then the cell is not functioning properly.
If a gene is false, then it causes problems in the part of the body where that particular instruction is relevant. CRISPR technology is able to track down a faulty gene and snap the DNA strand in the right place, then deploy the natural processes our bodies already use to heal the strand and alter the gene.
The cell tries to repair the double-stranded thing, but different DNA base, and this will do gene editing approach that we are talking about is used to correct short stretches of the DNA that cause disease. You don't need to replace the whole gene, you just need to replace the faulty fragment.
You also don't need to correct the genes in all of the cells of the patient, just when they are relevant to this function. So either cells are normal or DNA corrected may then be introduced.
really important breakthrough because it's the first collection of mutation in humans, and this is that is very important achievement. But of course, the important thing is to make this technology widely available.
Now, many diseases are caused by faulty genes either present when we're born, or, as in the case of cancer, as a result of mutations. Time for our next expert witness. Part 3. Tackling blood cancer. One of the biggest battles faced by the medical world is to treat cancer. And gene editing is used in this context, but as we are about to discover, it faces important limitations. Cancer is a large group of diseases that can start in almost any organ or tissue of the body when abnormal cells grow uncontrollably. It is primarily caused by changes in cell DNA, otherwise known as mutations. The body's immune system is able to fight back, and it can be made more effective in doing so by using a treatment called immunotherapy.
Historically, cancer treatments have tried to use cells that were infected to try and improve the way the body can get rid of cancer by harnessing the power of the immune system. So that's what we call immunotherapy. So we're using the technology to engineer the immune cells that do that to patients. Much more challenging, in fact, is to try and fix the gene directly in patients.
And fixing those genes in the blood is what we're going to talk about next.
We're seeing Catherine. I'm affiliated with the UCL Institute of Child Health in Great Ormond Hospital in London.
One of the key things about baby KJ is the fact that the treatment was introduced directly into the body, instead of cells from the liver being removed, gene edited, and then returned. This was made more straightforward because of where the problem was in the body.
So if we inject treatments directly into patients, one of the first places the bloodstream will carry those treatments to is the liver. And so if you've got an underlying gene defect or mutation that you want to change, doing it in the liver is actually easier than doing it in probably any other organ system. So that's what's been the biggest change, I think, in recent 2 or 3 years, the ability to put things directly into patients and allow them to change genes and organs like
Leukemia is cancer of the tissues of the blood, and it causes the production of an excessive number of abnormal white blood cells. One of the traditional methods of treating this is to introduce healthy cells into the body that will function normally. And these healthy cells can be genetically modified before they are introduced to make them more effective in the fight.
We've got a long experience using bone marrow transplantation and immunotherapy to try and treat some of these conditions. And what we do now is when we collect the cells for a transplant, we've got an opportunity to engineer them and make them better at targeting particular types of leukemia. Particularly there's immune cells like T cells, white blood cells that can get to almost any part of the body to try and clean up an infection. And we can collect those cells and engineer them so they acquire new properties that allow them to go and hunt down specific types of cancer cells, blood cancer cells, that they can eradicate almost completely from the body wherever they may be hiding.
Over what period of time might you see a recovery?
Conventionally, the treatments actually start being effective within 2 or 3 days of being infused. You can see some symptoms straight away. Patients develop fever and often flu-like symptoms. I'd say within about 2 weeks or 3 weeks they're at peak activity against the leukemia, and by a month they should have done the bulk of their job against these types of leukemia. And we'd expect patients who've had a successful response to be in remission.
So gene editing can be effective in treating leukemia. But what about other types of cancer? Now, we've already explained that it would be challenging to get a treatment that modified the cells by infusing a drug into the body because it would likely break down or be used up before it got to where it needed to be. But our third expert witness explains that a cancer tumour is also a tricky prospect for gene editing for another reason. And that is because whereas blood cancer cells stay as individual cells, cells belonging to other cancer types are largely organized into tumors.
So it might have other tissues around it, might have collagen and fibrosis, its own blood supply. So it's no longer what you might think of as a simple cancer. It becomes more complicated and sophisticated. And each time those cells divide, they change slightly and mutate. It's very hard to find a single target on lung cancer cells compared to, say, leukemia that's just affecting a subset of white blood cells. Much more difficult to deal with solid tumors once they become more complex.
Nonetheless, the clear progress that is being made with the help of CRISPR technology is that gene editing either inside or outside the body has become more precise in terms of getting to the right part of the DNA strand. So therefore, once in the cell, it's more effective.
You might have a delivery from a supermarket and it's going to deliver that parcel to your town. If you want to use CRISPR now in base editing, the guided system is so precise it will get it to your exact street, and if it's really, really precise, it will get it to your exact front door.
What might this mean for where gene editing goes next? Time for our fourth Expert Witness. Part 4. The Gene-Edited Future.
Jennifer Doudna, professor, University of California, Berkeley, and founder of the Innovative Genomics Institute.
The CRISPR technology used to treat baby KJ was discovered in 2012, when Jennifer Doudna, along with her colleague Emmanuel Charpentier, demonstrated that a bacterial immune system could be used to edit DNA with great accuracy. The discovery was a remarkable scientific breakthrough, and the pair were honored with the Nobel Prize for their work. CRISPR has already been used to produce a gene-editing treatment for the genetic disease sickle cell anemia, and the treatment has been approved by several regulators around the world. In the case of baby KJ, the treatment was designed and approved by the US regulator that was specific to his genetic disorder. From bench to bedside took just 6 months.
I think what's exciting thinking in the future is that it may be possible to vastly streamline that process, especially because there are lots of diseases that are caused by a gene, but where the detailed mutation that causes the disease is different in different individuals. And this is where CRISPR's capabilities really come into play, because it's a technology that can be programmed for different mutations. And so, in principle, you can imagine being able to accelerate that process, to simplify it, and of course to reduce the cost.
Part of the key to reducing cost is being able to fast-track not just the development of the drug, but the regulatory process. Now, as we know, the treatment for baby KJ was made specifically for him. So are we going to have to face the same regulatory hurdles every single time we create a treatment for an individual?
I think the hope would be that in the future it would be possible to vastly streamline that approval process. Of course, you want to have regulations in place to ensure that something like this is safe and effective for patients, but we also want a process that doesn't needlessly require expensive, time-consuming testing that is really obviated by the fact that the technology is proven to work for a particular disease.
It is important to recognize at this point that there are concerns about gene editing, not just that the treatments may have side effects, but also ethical considerations.
From the very beginning, it was clear that CRISPR is a technology that comes with great responsibility. It has risks associated with it when you're making a change to DNA. This is, of course, a profound thing to be doing. I want to be clear that in KJ, the way CRISPR was used was to affect his personal health, but not to change his germline DNA, meaning not to change DNA that would be passed on to the third generation of the germline of his sperm. But we know that type of change with CRISPR is certainly possible. There's just an ongoing, I think, need to be very careful about how CRISPR is used.
Even so, Dr. Dr. Doudna says it's unlikely any children of KJ would suffer from the same disease because we get our DNA from both parents.
It's important to point out that the reason he suffers from the disease that he had is that he inherited a mutated copy of a particular gene from both mom and dad. And so unless he were to marry or have children with someone who had another mutation in that same gene, the likelihood of having a child with his defect would be very low.
So that's the quite overwhelming sometimes to look at your work and see the change it's making and what potential it has to change so many people's lives.
It's really profound. I've met patients that have received CRISPR therapies and heard their stories. Some of them write to me over email, and I've also spoken to them. And hearing their personal stories is incredibly moving. I think what makes it potentially completely transformative in more broadly across the world of healthcare and for human beings across the planet in the future is that the nature of the use of technology in this case was such that it could be applied to other rare diseases. I mean, our plan is really to roll this out as a platform process that can be used for other rare diseases so that they can be treated quickly in a similar fashion to KJ. That would be the hope.
And there's also hope from another direction. The collaboration needed to develop, test, and deliver one specifically designed drug to one patient in the space of 2 months is similar to what the modern medical world is looking at. So now back to our question. Have we seen a breakthrough in preventing genetic diseases? The CRISPR technology
information about South Africa. Very information on X. On X. For the BBC trending, he checks social media claims. Join us after the news.
BBC News is Israel says it's completed a large wave of air attacks from Tehran, targeting buildings linked to Iran's nuclear program and triggering the defense ministry. Israel today has also struck
near the city, setting them on fire. Israel's military has warned citizens in the northern centre of the country to seek shelter for the second time within hours after detecting more incoming Iranian missiles. Explosions have been heard in both Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Donald Trump has been overseeing a large military parade in Washington as mass protests take place across the United States against his leadership. The protesters accused Mr. Trump of attacking civil rights and displaying increasingly authoritarian tendencies. A huge search is taking place in the U.S. state of Minnesota for a man who shot dead a Democratic Party politician and her husband. The 57-year-old suspect is accused of killing Melissa and Mark Hortman at their home. The former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been stripped of France's highest honour, the Légion d'honneur, as a result of his conviction of corruption. Mr. Sarkozy was found guilty of bribing a judge 4 years ago and finally handed a 3-year sentence in December last year. Large crowds have taken part in a protest in Ivory Coast's main city, Abidjan, to demand that opposition candidates, barred from a planned presidential vote, be allowed to stand. Many chanted the name of the main opposition leader, Tidjane Thiam. He was disqualified because he was not legally a citizen when he registered for the vote. Nicaragua's first female president, Violeta Chamorro, has died aged 95 in Costa Rica. She entered politics after the assassination of her husband, an anti-government newspaper editor, in the late 1970s. That's the latest from BBC News.
When Donald Trump became president in January, one of his first acts was to halt the program that allowed refugees to come to the US. Overnight, foreigners fleeing war and persecution in their home countries found that they were no longer welcome in America. But there is one group of people who President Trump decided to make an exception for, raising considerable eyebrows: white South Africans. On the 12th of May, 59 Afrikaners arrived in Washington to receive refugee status. At a press conference, President Trump said that he had acted because Afrikaners, the white community that largely ruled South Africa during apartheid, faced an existential threat.
They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me.
And a couple of weeks later, while hosting the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, during a live news conference, Trump repeated widely discredited claims of a white genocide taking place in South Africa.
They're being executed, and they happen to be white, and most of them happen to be foreigners.
His words echoed the views of his South African-born former advisor, Elon Musk, who's repeatedly used his X platform to amplify claims of a white genocide. But many South Africans dismiss this image of their country as wild misinformation.
I'm a white Afrikaans-speaking farmer. My family are white-speaking Afrikaans farmers. I've never witnessed a genocide.
South Africa does have one of the highest murder rates in the world, affecting citizens of all backgrounds. So where does this idea that white South Africans are being uniquely targeted come from? Welcome to BBC Trending. With me, Jonathan Griffin, and from Johannesburg, I'm joined by South African journalist Mpho Lakajin.
Together, we're going to look at why the Trump presidency has been so interested in South Africa by laying out some of the key issues that he and his recent senior advisor, Elon Musk, have posted about.
It's clear Trump has a particular interest in the fate of Afrikaners in South Africa. Afrikaners are mainly white people of Dutch descent. They've lived in South Africa since the 1650s.
Historically, Afrikaners were downtrodden by the British in the Boer Wars. But after that, they came to seize the reins of power politically and agriculturally at a time when the black population was stripped of their rights to own land. The consequences are still being felt to this day. A 2017 government land audit revealed white people, who today make up about 7% of the population, own 72% of total farmland held by individuals.
So where did President Trump get the idea that Afrikaners are a disadvantaged group? One explanation could be the Trump team's contact with an Afrikaner pressure group called AfriForum. AfriForum has been lobbying those in Trump's inner circle for years. In February, a few weeks after the publication of that presidential action, a post on AfriForum's X account showed a delegation from their team suited and smiling with the pointed top of the Washington Monument poking above their heads. Accompanying text claimed they met with the Trump administration, requesting intensified pressure on ANC leaders in the interests of Afrikaners and South Africa.
South African President and African National Congress leader Cyril Ramaphosa subsequently accused AfriForum of spreading misinformation about their own country and being unpatriotic. He also suggested law enforcement could look at whether the group's actions were treasonous.
Private property rights under threat in South Africa.
1 month after their trip, AfriForum posted a 47-minute-long YouTube video entitled Is Trump Right About South Africa? In it, the group lists grievances on issues from land expropriation to farmer tax. Let's talk about farmer tax first.
I asked Stanley Green, the CEO of AfriForum, for his take. Let's now talk about security. As a white man who lives in South Africa, Gali, do you feel targeted?
Well, if somebody sins, kill the bird, kill the farmer.
Let's talk about security.
No, well, I think everybody feels targeted because the police aren't able to successfully fight the scourge of crime. It's too big.
What's interesting to me, Impo, is that in both the interview and the online video, AfriForum talk a lot about violence, but much of the chat keeps coming back to a song, Kill the Boer.
The poor, the farmer, the poor.
Yes, it's a specific anti-apartheid multilingual song. Boer is the Afrikaans word for farmer. But since the 19th century, it has also meant Afrikaans peasant. In my conversations with Kali, the song came up a lot. And in May, when Trump ambushed President Ramaphosa in the Oval Office in front of the world's media with the unexpected screening of a video, that video itself contained instances of Kill the Boer being chanted by a couple of notable South African politicians. AfriForum say that song is hate speech, but supporters of the song say it is a celebration of the fight against white minority rule and not meant to be taken literally. In 2024, AfriForum lost a high-profile court case over the song, with the Supreme Court of Appeals adding the defendant was not actually calling for farmers or white South Africans of Afrikaans descent to be shot. The Constitutional Court say the matter is closed.
What about actual farmer tax, though? Well, at this point, it's worth noting that farmer tax are rarely the racist hate crimes they're often depicted to be. The vast majority of cases feature some degree of robbery, and black people are often victims too. AfriForum say the frequency of farm murders is very high compared to murders in the rest of the country, whereas analysts we've spoken to say that farmer tax are just one crime in a relatively violent society. In February, a Facebook user in Belgium claimed, "There is a genocide in South Africa. 60 white farmers are killed every day by black South Africans." But those numbers are way off. My colleague Peter Mwai has been looking at the stats from the South African Police Service and found that there were 44 farm murders of all racial groups in 2024, in a country that recorded 26,232 murders between January and December. Usually the police don't release data about the race of those killed in farm attacks, but we do have data for between January and March 2025. 5 of the 6 people killed on farms were black, and 1 was white.
While the majority of farms are owned by white people, townships have majority black populations and are some of the most dangerous places in South Africa. About 50% of all murders take place in about 12% of South African Police Service precincts. These are areas that are primarily townships or poor areas in metropolitan cities, mostly populated by black African people. The country's crime statistics show murder victims are overwhelmingly young black men.
There's no genocide in South Africa towards farmers, and I think we emphasize that.
That's Johan Kutsie, CEO of Agri SA, one of the biggest agricultural organizations in South Africa. Johan says he recently met with White House representatives and emphasized that murders on farms must be placed in a wider context of murders in South African society.
Do we have farm murders? Yes, we do. But so we also have other murders. Focus on the criminality in South Africa.
Let's get stuck into another one of the hot button topics about South Africa, land expropriation. In January, the South African President, Cyril Ramaphosa, signed into law a bill allowing land seizures by the state without compensation, provided that it's in